Yo, what is up guys? Today we are creating picture with pen and tablet. Also AI intelligence.
The client approached me with their idea for me to draw Phoenix Wright from the Ace Attorney series being soaked while in the rainfall, trying to take cover by covering his head with his suit jacket. And as far as style, they wanted me to draw it in a similar style to the Kingdom Hearts character that I drew in the previous episode. It was important to them that he would look extra annoyed as well. Final detail, they wanted a street light for the lighting. Without running the timer, I first thought I would just hop on a canvas to see what instinctually would come out of my brain with this prompt in mind. And it ended up being like an arms above the head type deal. Kind of unnatural looking, to be honest, but hey, this is just a test. And I did the same thing from the side as well to just get a better feel for it, see if I understand it or not. I did not understand it and realized it's probably best if I act this pose out myself on camera and reference that instead. So I whipped out my webcam and showcased my world-class acting skills and took a few screenshots of that to use as pose reference. If you need reference for things you cannot shoot yourself, then the best place to acquire those is through Graphic Studios. They got a massive selection of high-quality reference photo packs. Check them out through the link below and support the channel. Now, at the time, I had been messing around with Stable Diffusion and the Open Pose feature. So out of curiosity, I thought I'd see what were to happen if I ran my reference photo through it. To give it easy data to work with, I got rid of everything in the background and typed out the text prompt to see if I could perhaps get some reference material for things like wetness of the clothing and the background. So the first result was questionable, but after adding more specification to the prompt, I actually got something half decent as far as the composition. I liked how the orange halos brought out the character's silhouette against the dark background. However, he still had the suit jacket on and was holding like some trash bag looking shit above his head. So I tried specifying the prompt more and doing a few more iterations. Next one just looked goofy and weird. Nothing usable as reference here. This one looks goofy as well. However, I did actually like the folds on the white shirt on this one, and I threw that image onto my reference board for that aspect. The pose was kind of straightforward. Looking back at it now, perhaps a bit too symmetrical overall, but maybe that's not a bad thing considering the actual activity performed by the character. He needs to have like a sturdy grip on the jacket, especially since him being annoyed. But anyway, once I got to drawing his face, I realized I could actually turn his head to reduce the feeling of symmetry a bit, which I did. That's cool. Otherwise, the sketching phase went smoothly without many issues. I was able to reference the AI pic to figure out the logic behind his short folds, so I ended up calling it done at 45 minutes and moved on to the client wanted a strong street light blasting on the character, so I started out by drawing out some shapes. I made it so that half his head is lit. The top half is in shadow of the suit jacket that's being held up. Now this is a directional light source, which means that its edges are quite harsh. However, I still felt like it could use some smoothing out on some areas, just so it would be a bit more aesthetically pleasing. I then just simply masked in the color areas and threw a quick nighttime filter over the whole thing and was able to preview what the whole thing looks like together. Now, it did look a little empty still, so I threw in some blue ambient light from the side, just as like a little bit of a filler to make it not as empty. So the next challenge was to convey the fabrics being soaked, which is something I don't think I've had to draw much before, not much ever. I sought out some photo references and gave it a shot by first defining areas in close contact with the skin with this orange tone. And of course, it's important to have strong highlights that reflect the light sources to imply wetness. After doing all that, I thought it was at a good enough level to convey where the image is headed, so I was able to send it off to the client for review. Luckily, they enjoyed it the way it was. The only change requested was for me to change the shape of the hair on one side to basically protrude outward a little bit more. So it's time for my favorite part of the process, the ambient occlusion pass, where I turned a man into a clay sculpture lit evenly by overcast light. So this helps bring some proper depth and dimension to the piece. To blend it together with the rest of the colors, I experimented with some blending modes and ended up landing on color burn. I find that it preserves the original color while also saturating it in a nice way if you tune it a little bit. Looks pretty decent, but I still felt like some areas could use more darkening, which I addressed on a new layer above everything. With all these shading and lighting layers set up, I thought it was a good point to start off with the... So in this stage I cleaned up some rougher pieces of the shading layers and added more definition to various smaller forms, such as a few angle changes on his face and, more importantly, the folds on his shirt. There was more detail to be added there to enhance the wetness, defining smaller orange areas where the fabric is in contact with the skin and some little thin blue folds over those areas. Makes like an effective rendering of the wetness. In order to get a bit of a clearer vision of what the final result would look like, I threw in some dots all over the picture and motion blurred them to create some raindrops. And additionally, I threw in a big ol' halo from the top street light over the whole thing. And it actually did effectively enhance the lighting by like a good 20%. Now, I still had roughly an hour left on the clock, so I took my time in this stage. The half-visible line work felt awkward, so I basically doubled down on the line weights in some areas and also added in like some smaller details with the lines, such as the pocket on his shirt and other little details. Now when it came to the wet look of the shirt, I still felt like it wasn't really coming through strong enough, so I went for another little reference hunted down some pictures of wet men, you know what I'm saying. A key change it helped me make was to amp up those little reflections, to basically take the big yellow light and condense it into smaller reflection shapes. Plus, also darken some deeper crevices. Now, there was around 30 minutes left on the clock, and the wetness looked convincing enough to me at this point, so I did something else. I threw in a little gradient map over the whole thing, like one of those default Clip Studio gradients, on soft light mode, and that actually enhanced the nighttime look of the picture quite a whole lot. However, the backdrop looked a little awkward, with just like a gradient there, so I wanted to spice it up a little. And to do that, I actually used one of those AI images as reference, because it had like a bokeh thing going on, which is easy to do by just throwing in like a bunch of dots and shapes that don't need to be detailed at all since they will be blurred, which I did. It's nice. Very nice. Success. So the client approached me with a request to draw their OC derived from the DC universe, who operates mainly in Gotham City. They wanted me to draw him on a rooftop looking at the city while posing with his gun. Should be a relatively calm scene as well. Now, I had a pretty clear vision as to what I wanted the camera angle and the composition to be. To begin, I started sketching out the gist of it. Only about 10 minutes into the process, and I realized without a pose reference I would be wasting a whole lot of time. So as has become common practice for me on this channel, I ended up taking a reference. I'm gonna have to blur that, obviously. I don't want to do like a body reveal. Maybe one day, if this video gets like 100k views, then I'll do it. Now, since he's supposed to be sitting on a rooftop, it also made sense to use a 3D model for that, to set it up in a believable manner within the time limit. An additional thing I used the 3D model for was the gun, since it's in a kind of a weird perspective and it's interacting with the hands. I didn't have time to figure it out from imagination. Yeah. Now, with all these elements in place, I started sketching away to try and finish the lines within a reasonable amount of time. And actually, I did manage to finish the bulk of it within the first hour. Now, the sketching ended up leaking over a fair bit into the next hour as well, since it's important for me to have a solid sketch to color. And I actually drew the full body of the character as opposed to the half body of the previous one. But it is worth it though, since I do all the mental problem solving in the sketching stage. image, which comes in useful for the later shading stages. So I sent it for review to the client already. Now, they enjoyed it the way it was, luckily. Only suggestion they added was for me to add rain to the scene later on when I would get the coloring. I wasn't satisfied with how the boots looked, so I asked the client what type of boots these are so that I could find a reference and draw them properly. Turns out these are heeled engineer boots. So yeah, now I'm a little wiser in the boot world. Additionally, I took some new references of myself to get the sleeves on flippin' freaking jacket right. It's just things like that, little things like that that make a character believable in some cases. So it's color time. Not color dodge time, just color time. So I quickly masked in the different color areas and threw a quick nighttime filter over the whole thing again to match with the upcoming sky color. Now this is where things get interesting. I quickly painted in some rough clouds using a smoke brush and a perspective ruler, and then took that rough image of the sky and threw it into stable diffusion to generate a proper sky for me quickly based on my guidance. Now the result was pretty nice. Instantly. You know, there isn't a whole lot to go wrong with when generating something abstract like a bunch of clouds as opposed to like a human figure. So that's a cool use of AI, I think, for like background elements like that, just enhance the main subject, you know what I mean? I then quickly painted over the AI image to breathe some more life into it, to make it look more human-like, to help bring out the character's dark silhouette against the newly painted brighter parts. So next up was the main light source. I thought it would make sense for him to be tilting his head toward it, as if he's looking at the sun peeking through like a thin layer of storm clouds or something like that. That sort of lighting situation, I made the light color and intensity reflect that. Usually I would blend out the edges of the lighting a bit, but this time I thought the sharp transitions actually looked kind of nice and stylistic, so I kept it that way. Now, to paint in the ambient occlusion, I temporarily hid all the colors and used lasso shapes compared with a big ol' soft brush, painted in varying intensity levels. Now, to fill in his shadow side, I thought it would be a good idea to fill it in with like an ambient light sort of pass, but it kind of just ended up looking like a directional light since there is no blending, and having the same blue color on it looked kind of boring though, so I just shifted the hue towards red on it a little bit to match the upcoming wall color. However, there were only 6 minutes remaining on the timer, which was unfortunately not enough time to color and render the building, so I ended up adding 30 extra minutes on the timer with no additional charge to the client. I mean, it's still not enough time to be precise with it, so I just kept the coloring and detailing rough with some painted smoke or like mist over the whole thing to hide how undetailed it is. I took a bit of a stylized experimental approach here for like another smoke pass, however it didn't really fit. What did fit, however, was a vignetting effect in the corners of the image, plus some raindrops thrown in there that the client requested to further draw attention away from the lack of detail on the building. And lastly, I threw in some quick highlights from the main light source all over the character, kind of roughly as well. Like, I wish I would have been a bit more precise with it, but it works, I think, so that's cool, does the trick. I ended up doing a few more color tweaks off camera, but yeah, this is the end result.
Shirts right now or else.
Bruh, check out my SoundCloud.
Hey kid, wanna buy some reference packs? I got you covered, fam.